Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. West Virginia heading into 2024, one of the more fascinating programs in the Big 12. And I think every time we talk about this West Virginia team, I think we have to remind the people that this was a West Virginia football program that won 9 games in the 2023 season. And for the West Virginia fans that have been rocking with the boys for the last couple of months and really the last 12 months, you guys will remember that. Now, I was pretty high on West Virginia, or higher than most in terms of West Virginia going into 2023. I'll put my hand up and say I wasn't that high on West Virginia. They shocked a lot of people, including myself. And I think Neal Brown is, finally trying to establish that winning culture within this program. And you return a lot of key pieces from that 2023 season. Really excited to get into this roster, take a look at the schedule, and, get a feel for what this West Virginia team is going to be in the 2024 year. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. Massive shout out to the West Virginia fans. Every time we talk West Virginia, I learn a ton from you guys in the comment section. Throughout the last couple of years, you guys have put me on a ton of players that were not necessarily on my radar, but kind of broke out for West Virginia. I would love for you guys to let me know how you guys are feeling about certain players that I might not have talked about in the comments section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And let's start on the offensive side of the football, where going back 12 months ago, why was I higher than most on West Virginia heading into 2023? It was going to be because of how they could run the football. They had a really good offensive line. They had a very talented running back room, kind of headlined by C.J. Donaldson, but Jaheim White emerged as a true freshman that was a difference maker. You saw West Virginia and their ability to run the football allow them to be consistent every single Saturday. Now, I think on the defensive side of the football, there were some inconsistencies, there were some injuries, and there were some inconsistencies in this passing attack. But when you have kind of that trump card, that thing that you can rely on every single Saturday, which was that West Virginia rushing attack, again, it allows you to be in a lot of football games every single Saturday. And you look towards the 2024 season, this rushing attack is still going to be one of the better units that you see in the Big 12 in the 2024 season. I think it starts with the offensive line, where I think on paper, some casual college football fans will look at this West Virginia offensive line and say, you lose guys like Zach Frazier, Doug Nestor. Those were Zach Frazier, one of the better offensive linemen that we've seen at West Virginia kind of through the history of the program. You look at the West Virginia offensive line heading into 2024, I love two things about it. One, it's really experienced. I mean, you start going through the projected starting five. I mean, a guy like Wyatt Millen, over 2,200 snaps. A guy like Yates, over 2,700 snaps. Remick, 1,100 snaps. The most inexperienced projected starter for West Virginia on the offensive line is coming at the right tackle spot with Nick Malone, who is going to be a fifth-year senior, has been in this West Virginia program for a very long time. Two things that stand out. One, it's an experienced offensive line. It has some high upside with a guy like Wyatt Millen, who I think is one of the better offensive tackles that you see in the country. But I think most importantly, they've played a ton of football together. And that is something that's just becoming more and more rare on the offensive line, as so many programs are becoming reliant on the transfer portal. I mean, West Virginia's got a lot of the same faces that have been within this offensive line for 3 to 4 years. And so you look at the West Virginia offensive line, and I get it, on paper, you lose a guy like Zach Frazier. I think this West Virginia offensive line is going to be very good in 2024. You couple that with two running backs in C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White, who are exceptional running backs, potentially the best running back duo in the Big 12. And what I love most about them is they balance each other out. I mean, Jaheim White, lightning in a bottle, a guy that can make pretty much just anybody on the football field miss, almost 8 yards per carry last year, which is a ludicrous number for a true freshman. And then C.J. Donaldson Jr., this was a running back that we saw be one of the better backs in the country as a true freshman. Maybe not as consistent as you would have liked in the 2023 season as a sophomore. If C.J. Donaldson gets back to form in terms of what we saw as a true freshman, you're looking at a running back duo that is not only dynamic, but balances each other out really well. I mean, CJ Donaldson, your hammer, Jaheim White, more of your explosive play kind of guy behind an offensive line that we think is going to be really good with a quarterback that can get it done with his legs as well. There's reason to believe this West Virginia rushing attack, which was a top 5 unit in the country last year, averaging 222 rushing yards per game. I think it's going to be extremely good in 2024, which makes us feel good about this West Virginia team. Now, in the passing attack, it was such an interesting passing attack for West Virginia where, I mean, it's no secret. This was a West Virginia team that ran the football more than just about any other offense in the country. When they did decide to throw the football, they were going to push the ball down the field. And so I think on paper, people will look at Garrett Green's completion percentage and say, sitting at 54%, that seems awfully low. You look at the average depth of target, 13.5 yards down the field. Over 50% of Garrett Green's attempts went 10-plus yards down the field. This was an offense that they're going to run a lot. They're going to force you to put the bodies in the box to stop the run, and then we're just going to try to hit the deep ball. And again, Garrett Green throws a very nice deep ball. I think you're looking for him to, maybe take a step in terms of consistency and have that completion percentage take a few steps in the right direction. But this is not going to be a West Virginia offense that looks like Oregon and is going to have an average depth of target of 6 yards and a 70% completion percentage. This is going to be a passing attack that has a little bit of a lower completion percentage, but they're going to be extremely aggressive, pushing the ball down the field. Now, I think the big question with this West Virginia offense, confident in Garrett Green, confident in the offensive line, confident in the rushing, in the running back room. You got to have better wide receiver play. It was a problem last year. I mean, the drops were bad, but the drops were really bad at important times. I mean, I think at times it cost West Virginia football games in terms of dropping the football in the big moments. If this West Virginia wide receiver room, which you kind of like the talent that you have in the room, you bring in a guy like Jaden Brave from Oklahoma State. I look at the West Virginia wide receiver room and say, hey, if we can just be a little bit more consistent in terms of catching the football, this West Virginia passing attack is going to take a step in the right direction. Now, going to the defensive side of the football, I think we all feel pretty good that this West Virginia offense is going to be able to run the football. It's going to be able to put points up on the board. How good can this defense be in 2024? Kind of determines what the ceiling is for West Virginia in the 2024 season. I want to start in the front seven where, I thought at times specifically on the defensive line, West Virginia lacked that difference maker in terms of getting after the quarterback, creating negative plays. You start taking a look at the numbers. The leader for West Virginia in sacks last year was only 4.5. You look at Sean Martin. He had 21 quarterback hurries, but only 2.5 sacks. Can we get Sean Martin to translate that disruption that he had in 2023 into more negative plays in 2024? That's one of the questions that I have for this West Virginia defense. I think secondly, the linebacker room that Lee Kogba, one of the better linebackers that we saw in the Big 12, you have to replace a ton of experience in production with a guy like Lee. So I think we have some question marks about what that linebacker room looks like. And then in the secondary, I think it's just going to get better because they're going to be more healthy. I mean, Beanie Bishop was phenomenal for West Virginia. I believe he had 20 pass breakups in 2023, was one of the better defensive backs that we saw not only in the Big 12, but in the country. Outside of Beanie Bishop, they were dealing with so many different injuries. It would just seem like a revolving door in the back end in terms of West Virginia secondary. That's not a unit that you want to have new faces in the lineup every single Saturday. And you saw West Virginia give up some explosive plays because of that lack of continuity. Can this West Virginia secondary just be a little bit more healthy? You like Aubrey Burks. You like a guy like Anthony Wilson Jr. You bring in a ton of new names in the transfer portal that maybe are coming from the group of fives, in some cases, Power 5 guys like Jaheim Joseph. It's an experienced secondary that has some new faces in the transfer portal, but the kind of bodies that they brought in through the portal, a lot of these guys have played a lot of football during their collegiate careers. And so can this secondary just find a little bit more consistency? I don't think West Virginia secondary is going to be a top 10 unit in the country, but I do think it can take some strides in 2024 just based on being a little bit more consistent and being a little bit more healthy. And so there are some reasons to think West Virginia takes strides on the defensive side of the football from the 2023 season. Getting into the schedule, and I think this is a really fascinating conversation to have for West Virginia, where, again, this is a team that won 9 football games last year, was awfully close to winning 10 games if you don't lose on the road to Houston in kind of a wild weeknight game that West Virginia probably should have won. You look at the schedule in 2024, there's no way around it. It's a difficult schedule. I look at the first 4 games before the bye week on September 28th, massive 4 games. I'm not going to sit here and pick Penn State or pick West Virginia to beat Penn State and Morgantown. That being said, I have that circled, at least on my sheet, in terms of one of those upsets that could take a lot of people by surprise. Not enough people are talking about that week 1 matchup in Morgantown. You look at Penn State, they replace a lot on the defensive side of the football. They have 2 new coordinators on both sides of the football. If you get a rowdy environment where West Virginia is able to hit some explosive plays and stay in that game with all the turnover that Penn State's experiencing, I could see West Virginia being in that game in the second half into the fourth quarter. It's a tough matchup because Penn State's very good against the run, and West Virginia is going to want to run the football. That being said, at home, week 1, electric environment with a Penn State team that has a lot of new faces, not only on the football field, but in the coaching room. I think that's a very capable, or kind of a possible, I should say, week 1 upset. You look at Albany, should be a win. You look at on the road at Pitt, rivalry game. I think Pitt is not a very good football team this year. I think West Virginia should handle that game relatively easily. So you're looking at 2-1 hosting this Kansas team that's one of the better teams in the Big 12. Again, you get them at home. I think there's a very good opportunity for West Virginia to win that football game. And so you look at the first 4 games, if you can be 3-1 heading into that bye week, you get 3 out of the 4 games at home. That kind of just gets the ball rolling for West Virginia because it doesn't really get much easier. So if you can get hot early, you can maybe start getting a little bit of confidence. You go on the road to Oklahoma State, an Oklahoma State team that I'm not as high on as most going into 2024. You get Iowa State at home. You get Kansas State at home for your homecoming game. That's going to be a massive game in terms of Big 12 championship races. Then you have to go across the country to Arizona before another bye week where I think the last back half of the schedule is gettable, right? On the road at Cincinnati, that's a game that West Virginia should win. You get Baylor at home, another game West Virginia should win. You get UCF at home. That is going to be a fascinating matchup where you have 2 of the best rushing attacks in the country squaring off late in November, and then you go on the road to Lubbock, Texas Tech. I think that, so you kind of start talking about what's the floor, what's the ceiling. I feel relatively good about what West Virginia's floor is. I think a bowl game is certainly possible. Now, it's a difficult schedule. And I think you can find 6 wins. And why you feel so confident you can find 6 wins when you can run the football like West Virginia can, you're going to be in almost every single one of these football games. And so I think the floor is relatively high. I think the ceiling is one of the more fascinating conversations where I think this team can be in contention for a Big 12 championship game appearance, right? One of your big out-of-conference games is Penn State. You can lose that one and still feel good about your potential to make the Big 12. You don't play Utah, which is probably the best team in the Big 12. Some games are going to have to fall West Virginia's way, which certainly happened in 2023. I look at West Virginia and say 12 months ago, I put the ceiling at 8 games, and I thought that was a little bit high. They won 9. And so the ceiling, I don't know if there's a ceiling for this West Virginia team. Right now, I have the ceiling at 9-3 heading into 2024, a team that certainly can be one of those sneaky teams that not getting a ton of conversation in the Big 12 championship race because you have teams like Utah and Kansas State and Kansas. They return the quarterback. They return a very experienced offensive line. They're going to have one of the best rushing attacks in the country. This is a West Virginia team that can take a lot of people by surprise in the 2024 season. Fired up for this program. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section, and we'll talk to y'all later.